The federal courtroom fell dead silent. Every person stopped breathing as they watched a small 8-year-old boy, the son of an accused Mafia boss, march down the center aisle. His expensive shoes clicked against the marble floor. He wore a designer jacket covered in geometric patterns, black and white with gold trim and red accents. In his trembling hands, held high above his head, he clutched a thick folder of documents. And what he shouted next shattered every rule of the federal justice system. "My dad is innocent, Your Honor, and I'll prove it." If Tony failed today, his father would spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison, or worse, disappear into the federal system where accused Mafia bosses don't survive long. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from. Your city helps this story reach more people. Judge Catherine Morales, a stern woman in her 60s, looked down at the boy with sharp, disbelieving eyes. "Young man, sit down immediately. This is a federal courtroom." "Your Honor," Tony interrupted, his voice shaking but clear. "My name is Tony Bernardo. That man is my father, Alfie Bernardo, and I have proof that someone framed him." He pointed to a massive, muscular man in an orange prison jumpsuit at the defendant's table. Bald, tattoos covering his thick forearms, a gold chain around his neck, tears streaming down his weathered face. The courtroom erupted. Journalists gasped. Camera flashes exploded. The marshals exchanged uneasy looks. Allowing a child to speak could expose him to people who killed without hesitation. People who had already destroyed his father and wouldn't think twice about silencing an 8-year-old witness. "Order!" Judge Morales banged her gavel. Mr. Vincent, the federal prosecutor, jumped up with an amused smile. "Your Honor, remove the child immediately." "I have proof," Tony shouted, holding his folder higher. "Proof that shows who really committed the crimes. A man powerful enough to frame a Mafia boss and make everyone believe it." Complete silence. Alfie's voice cracked. "Tony, son, please, go home." Tony turned to him, eyes wet. "No, Dad. You told me to be brave. You told me the truth always wins. I'm not leaving." The judge studied the boy's face. Something in his eyes made her pause. "Child, do you understand? Your father is accused of murder, racketeering. The evidence is overwhelming." "The evidence is fake," Tony said, steady now. "Planted by someone my father trusted, someone who wanted his empire, and wanted him gone forever." After a long moment, Judge Morales spoke. "I've been a judge for 28 years. I've never done this, but I'm going to let you speak." Mr. Vincent's face went red. "Your Honor, I object." "Objection noted. Sit down." Her voice was ice. "This is my courtroom." Tony turned to his father one last time. Alfie smiled through his tears, the first real smile in months. His lips moved silently. "I love you." Tony faced the judge. "Your Honor, I need to tell you about my father. Who he really is. What really happened. And the man who destroyed our family. A man sitting in this courtroom right now." Every eye was on the small boy with the designer jacket, the thick folder, and the brave heart. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Tony and his father lived in a mansion surrounded by iron gates, marble floors, crystal chandeliers. But despite the luxury, it often felt empty. Alfie left early every morning and came home late. But no matter the hour, he always visited Tony's room. "Still awake, little man?" "Waiting for you, Dad." Alfie would sit on the bed, stroke Tony's hair with rough, gentle hands, and tell stories about Mama. "Your mother was the most beautiful woman in the world, a laugh that lit up the whole room." Rosa died when Tony was 6. Cancer. The memories were fading like old photographs. After she died, Alfie changed. The newspapers called him the Bull. But Tony saw different, his father crying alone, whispering to Rosa's photograph, "I'm going to change. For Tony, I promise." He was trying to leave the criminal world behind. But someone powerful didn't want him to leave. Someone who would do anything to stop him. The newspapers called him the Bull. Every morning, Tony saw his father's face splashed across the tabloids at the corner store. Alfie Bernardo, photographed leaving restaurants with men in dark suits. Alfie Bernardo, caught on surveillance footage outside a warehouse the FBI called a criminal hub. Alfie Bernardo, accused of running the most dangerous crime family on the East Coast. The headlines screamed words like ruthless and monster and kingpin. Strangers whispered when Tony walked by. Teachers gave him strange looks. Kids at school called him Mafia boy and refused to sit next to him at lunch. That was the world's version of Alfie Bernardo. But Tony knew a different man. He knew the father who woke up early every Sunday to make pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. The father who burned them half the time and laughed about it, scraping the black parts into the trash while Tony giggled. He knew the father who cried during old movies, the black and white ones Mama used to love. Tony would peek through the study door and see his father sitting alone in the dark, tears running down his face, whispering Rosa's name like a prayer. He knew the father who tucked him in every single night, no matter how late he came home. Alfie would sit on the edge of Tony's bed, his massive frame making the mattress sink, and stroke Tony's hair with hands that the world called dangerous. But to Tony, felt safe. "Dad," Tony whispered one night, "are you really a bad guy, like they say on TV?" Alfie was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled Tony close, his voice thick. "I've made mistakes, son. Big ones. Things I can't take back." He swallowed hard. "But I'm going to be better. For you, for Mama. I promise." Tony believed him, because he saw things the newspapers didn't show. He saw his father meeting with lawyers who talked about legitimate business and clean investments. He heard phone calls where Alfie said things like, "I'm done, and find someone else, and I'm out." 2 years ago, when Rosa died, something broke inside Alfie Bernardo. The Bull, the man the city feared, spent 3 days locked in his bedroom refusing to eat. When he finally came out, his eyes were different, softer, sadder. "It's just us now, Tony," he said, kneeling down to meet his son's eyes. "And I'm going to make things right. No more of the old life. I swear on your mother's grave." Tony watched his father try. He watched him distance himself from the men in dark suits. He watched him start new businesses, restaurants, real estate, things with receipts and taxes and nothing to hide. Alfie Bernardo was climbing out of the darkness, but someone didn't want him to escape. Someone was watching, waiting, planning, and that someone was about to destroy everything. The night everything changed started with a sound Tony would never forget. 4 a.m. A crash so loud it shook the walls. Then shouting. Dozens of voices screaming, "FBI," and "Get down," and "Hands where we can see them." Tony sat up in bed, heart pounding. Red and blue lights flashed through his window, painting his bedroom in terrifying colors. He heard boots, heavy boots, thundering up the stairs. He ran to his door and cracked it open. The mansion was swarming with men in black tactical gear. They carried rifles. They wore helmets with visors. They moved like soldiers invading enemy territory. Tony crept to the top of the staircase and looked down. His father was on his knees in the marble foyer. 3 agents held him down, forcing his arms behind his back. Alfie, the man the city feared, the man they called the Bull, wasn't fighting. He wasn't resisting. He was searching. His eyes scanned the chaos until they found Tony at the top of the stairs. For one frozen moment, father and son locked eyes. "Tony!" Alfie shouted as they yanked him to his feet. "The truth is in the safe! Remember our code! I love you, son! Remember our—" An agent shoved him forward, cutting off his words. They dragged him toward the front door, his bare feet scraping against the cold marble. "Dad!" Tony screamed, running down the stairs. "Dad!" But arms caught him. A woman in an FBI jacket held him back, her grip firm but not cruel. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay, you're safe. Tony wasn't safe. He watched through burning tears as they forced his father into a black SUV. The door slammed, the lights flashed, and just like that, Alfie Bernardo was gone. The truth is, in the safe. Remember our code. Tony repeated the words in his head like a lifeline. By sunrise, child services arrived. A tired woman with a clipboard asked Tony questions he couldn't answer. Did he have relatives? Was there someone who could take him? There was. Grandma Lucia. She arrived at noon, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. Her silver hair was pulled tight. Her eyes were cold. She looked at Tony the way someone looks at a stain on expensive fabric. "Come," she said. No hug, no comfort, just that single word. The drive to her house was silent. Tony stared out the window, watching his old life disappear behind him. Finally, Grandma Lucia spoke. "Your father destroyed this family's name. Generations of respect, gone because of him." Her voice was sharp as broken glass. "You will not speak of him in my house. You will not cry for him. He made his choices. Now we all pay the price." Tony said nothing, but inside, his father's words echoed. "The truth is in the safe. Remember our code." He didn't know what it meant yet, but he was going to find out. Tony's father had been in jail for 3 weeks when the trial began. Grandma Lucia didn't allow television in her house. She said it rotted the brain. But Tony found a way. Every afternoon, while she napped, he snuck into the sitting room and turned the volume down to almost nothing, pressing his ear against the speaker. The trial of Alfie the Bull Bernardo was everywhere. Every channel, every headline. The whole country was watching. And so was Tony. He saw his father on screen, sitting at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit. Alfie looked thinner, tired. His eyes had lost their light. He stared straight ahead like a man who had already been sentenced, but it was the witness that made Tony's blood run cold. Marco Vitelli. Uncle Marco. Tony remembered him. Of course he remembered him. Uncle Marco came to the mansion for holidays. He brought Tony presents, toy cars, video games, once a baseball glove signed by a famous player. He laughed loud and slapped Alfie on the back and called Tony Little Boss. Tony had loved him. Now Uncle Marco sat in the witness box, wearing an expensive suit, his hair slicked back, his face calm and serious. He raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. Then he lied. "Alfie Bernardo ordered the murder of 3 men, Marco said, his voice steady. "I was there. I heard him give the order." Tony's hands clenched into fists. "He ran drug operations through the restaurant supply company," Marco continued. "Cocaine, heroin, millions of dollars. I helped him count the money." No, that's not true. Alfie Bernardo is not a businessman. He's a killer, a drug lord, a monster. Tony couldn't hold it anymore. "He's lying!" he screamed at the television. "That's a lie! Dad never—" The slap came so fast Tony didn't see it. His head snapped sideways. His cheek burned. He stumbled back, crashing into the coffee table. Grandma Lucia stood over him, her face twisted with fury. "Your father," she hissed, "is a monster, a criminal, a disgrace to the Bernardo name." She grabbed Tony's chin, forcing him to look at her. "That man on television is telling the truth. The whole world knows it. Accept it." Tony's eyes filled with tears, not from the pain, but from the rage building inside him. "Dad said he was changing," Tony whispered. "He promised." Grandma Lucia laughed, cold, bitter. "Criminals always promise. They never change." She released his chin and stepped back. "Go to your room, and if I catch you watching that trial again, you'll regret it." Tony walked to his room on shaking legs. But he didn't cry. He sat on his bed, cheeks still burning, and thought about Uncle Marco's face. That calm, lying face. Why would Uncle Marco betray his father? What did he have to gain? Tony didn't have answers yet, but he was going to find them. Tony waited until midnight. Grandma Lucia's bedroom light went off at 10. By 11, the house was silent. By midnight, Tony was certain she was asleep. He slipped out of his window, dropped onto the soft grass below, and disappeared into the darkness. The family mansion was 12 blocks away. Tony walked the whole way, staying in the shadows, his heart pounding so loud he was sure the whole neighborhood could hear it. The streets were empty. The air was cold. Every distant siren made him freeze. But he kept moving. The truth is in the safe. Remember our code. The mansion looked different now. Yellow police tape stretched across the iron gates. Signs warned, "Federal crime scene. No entry." The windows were dark. The driveway where his father's cars once sat was empty. Tony found the gap in the back fence, the one he used to squeeze through when playing hide-and-seek. He was smaller then. Now it was tight. But he pushed through, ignoring the scratch of metal against his ribs. The back door had a keypad. Tony punched in the code. His birthday, the same code Alfie used for everything, and heard the lock click open. Inside, the mansion was a ghost of itself. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. The FBI had torn through everything, searching for evidence. But they didn't know about the safe. Tony crept through the darkness to his father's study. The room smelled like Alfie's cologne. Faint now, fading, but still there. Tony's eyes burned with tears he refused to let fall. Behind his father's desk, hidden beneath a painting of Tony's mother, was a small wall safe. Tony had seen his father open it once, years ago. Alfie didn't know Tony was watching. But Tony remembered. He reached up, removed the painting carefully, and stared at the keypad. Our code. Tony typed in the numbers. 0-3-1-5. March 15th. His mother's birthday. The safe clicked open. Inside, Tony found a thick envelope stuffed with documents. His hands trembled as he pulled them out and spread them across the desk. Financial records, bank statements, transactions highlighted in yellow showing money moving from family accounts into offshore accounts, accounts with Marco Vitelli's name on them. Uncle Marco was stealing. Tony kept digging. Photographs. Grainy, but clear enough. Marco Vitelli shaking hands with men Tony didn't recognize. But the caption on the back, written in his father's handwriting, told him everything. Marco meeting with Castellano family. June 14th. The Castellanos. Tony knew that name. They were rivals, enemies. And at the bottom of the safe, a small recording device. Old, dusty. But when Tony pressed play, the voices came through clearly. Marco's voice. Once Alfie's gone, we split his territory, 50-50. Another voice. And the evidence? Marco again. Already planted. The feds will do our work for us. Tony stopped breathing. Uncle Marco framed his father. And now Tony had the proof. Tony clutched the folder against his chest like it contained his father's life. Because it did. The next morning he skipped school and took 3 buses across the city to the downtown courthouse. He had looked up the address the night before, memorizing it, planning every step. The folder never left his hands. Not on the bus, not on the street, not in the elevator. Mr. Hawkins. That was his father's lawyer, a public defender assigned by the court after Alfie's assets were frozen. Tony had seen him on television, sitting next to his father, looking tired and overwhelmed. The office was small and cluttered. Papers stacked everywhere. Coffee cups lined the windowsill. Mr. Hawkins sat behind a desk buried in files, his tie loosened, his eyes ringed with dark circles. He looked up when Tony walked in. "Can I help you, kid?" "I'm Tony Bernardo," Tony said. "Alfie Bernardo's son." Mr. Hawkins blinked. Then he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face. "You shouldn't be here, son. Does your guardian know where you are?" "I have evidence." Tony stepped forward and placed the folder on the desk. "Proof that my dad is innocent. Proof that Marco Vitelli is lying." Something flickered in the lawyer's tired eyes. Curiosity? Maybe hope? He opened the folder. Tony watched him flip through the financial records, the photographs, the notes in Alfie's handwriting. He watched Mr. Hawkins pull out the small recording device, press play, and listen to Marco's voice admitting everything. For a moment, just a moment, Tony thought he saw the lawyer's expression change. Then Mr. Hawkins sighed. He closed the folder and pushed it back toward Tony. "Kid," he said slowly, "I believe you want to help. I really do. And this," he gestured at the folder, "this is compelling, if it's real." "It is real." Tony's voice cracked. "I found it in my dad's safe. Marco framed him. It's all right there." "I believe you." Mr. Hawkins held up his hand. "But here's the problem. You're 8 years old. You broke into a federal crime scene. You removed evidence without authorization." He shook his head. "None of this is admissible. Any judge would throw it out in 5 seconds. The prosecution would tear it apart." Tony felt the ground shift beneath him. But it's the truth." "The truth doesn't matter if it can't be used in court." Mr. Hawkins's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, son. I really am. But there's nothing I can do with this." A security guard appeared at the door. "Please escort Mr. Bernardo out," the lawyer said quietly. Tony grabbed his folder and stumbled out of the office, past the guard, down the hallway, through the lobby, and out the front doors. He made it to the courthouse steps before his legs gave out. He sat on the cold stone, clutched the folder to his chest, and cried. The truth didn't matter. Nobody believed a child. The federal prison was cold and gray and smelled like bleach. Tony sat in a plastic chair, staring through thick glass at an empty seat on the other side. His leg bounced. His hands shook. The folder sat in his lap. They wouldn't let him bring it inside, but he couldn't leave it behind. A buzzer sounded. A metal door opened. And then Tony saw his father. Alfie Bernardo shuffled into the room in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He was thinner, so much thinner. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes were sunken. The man who once filled every room with his presence now looked like a shadow of himself. A guard removed the handcuffs. Alfie sat down slowly, like every movement hurt. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass. Tony did the same. For a long moment, neither spoke. "You shouldn't be here, Tony." Alfie's voice was hoarse, broken. "I had to see you." Alfie closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. "Listen to me, son. Forget about me. Live your life. Go to school. Make friends. Be happy." His voice cracked. "Don't waste your childhood trying to save a man who can't be saved." Tony felt the tears coming, but forced them back. "I found the safe, Dad." Alfie went still. "I found everything. The bank records, the photographs, the recording." Tony leaned closer to the glass. "I know Uncle Marco framed you. I know he's working with the Castellanos. I have proof." Alfie's face twisted with pain. "Tony, please!" "The lawyer won't use it. He says it's inadmissible." Tony's voice shook. "But I don't care. I'm going to find another way." "There is no other way." Alfie pressed his palm against the glass. "I'm done, son. It's over. You need to accept that and move on." Tony slammed his own palm against the glass, matching his father's hand. "No." The word came out fierce, loud. A guard glanced over but didn't move. "You told me the truth always wins," Tony said, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "You told me to be brave. You promised Mama you would change, and you did change. I watched you. I know who you are." Alfie was crying now, too, silently, tears running down his hollow cheeks. "I'm going to save you, Dad." Tony's voice broke but didn't waver. "I promise." The guard called time. Alfie was pulled away, looking back at his son, until the metal door closed between them. That night, Tony didn't sleep. He sat in his room at Grandma Lucia's house with his phone hidden under the blankets, watching courtroom footage on YouTube. He studied how lawyers talked, how witnesses answered questions, how judges controlled the room. He practiced in the mirror, whispering so his grandmother wouldn't hear. "Your Honor, my name is Tony Bernardo, and I have evidence that will prove my father's innocence." Over and over, until he believed it himself. Back to the courtroom. Judge Catherine Morales studied Tony for a long moment. The entire room held its breath. Marshals stood frozen. The prosecutor's face was red with fury. Alfie, still in his orange jumpsuit, stared at his son with tears streaming down his face. "Young man," the judge said slowly, "you understand that what you're about to do is highly irregular. If your evidence is fabricated or misleading, there will be serious consequences." "I understand, Your Honor." Tony's voice trembled but didn't break. "But the evidence is real, and it will prove my father is innocent." The judge nodded once. "Proceed." Tony walked to the front of the courtroom. His legs felt like water. His hands shook so badly the folder rattled. Every eye in the room followed him: journalists, marshals, lawyers, strangers who had come to watch the Mafia boss fall. But Tony didn't look at them. He looked at his father. Alfie gave him a small nod. That was enough. Tony opened the folder. "Your Honor, these are financial records from my father's personal accounts." He held up the first stack of documents. "They show that over the past 2 years, someone was transferring large amounts of money into offshore accounts. Accounts that don't belong to my father." He pointed to the highlighted sections. "They belong to Marco Vitelli." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Tony saw Marco shift in his seat in the gallery, his calm expression flickering for just a moment. Tony pulled out the photographs next. "These photographs were taken by my father's private security. They show Marco Vitelli meeting with members of the Castellano crime family, my father's rivals." He held up the clearest image. "The date on the back is June 14th, 3 weeks before my father was arrested." The murmur grew louder. Judge Morales banged her gavel. "Order!" Tony's heart was pounding now. This was it. The moment that would change everything. He pulled out the small recording device. "Your Honor, this recording was found in my father's private safe. It's a conversation between Marco Vitelli and a member of the Castellano family." Tony pressed play. The room went silent. Marco's voice filled the courtroom, clear as day. "Once Alfie's gone, we split his territory, 50-50. Another voice. "And the evidence?" Marco again. "Already planted. The feds will do our work for us. Alfie Bernardo will rot in prison while we take everything he built." The recording ended. For one heartbeat, there was absolute silence. Then the courtroom exploded. Journalists shouted questions. Camera flashes erupted. People jumped to their feet. The prosecutor stood frozen, his face pale. Marco Vitelli was halfway out of his seat, his eyes wild with panic. "Order!" Judge Morales slammed her gavel again and again. "Order in this court!" Tony stood at the front of the room, folder clutched against his chest, tears streaming down his face. He had done it. Now the world knew the truth. The prosecutor was on his feet before the chaos settled. "Your Honor, I demand this so-called evidence be thrown out immediately." Mr. Vincent's voice was sharp with desperation. "It was obtained illegally by a minor who broke into a federal crime scene. It's inadmissible. It's contaminated. It's—" "Sit down, Mr. Vincent." Judge Morales' voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I will decide what is and isn't admissible in my courtroom." The prosecutor's mouth opened, then closed. He sat. The judge turned her gaze to the gallery, where Marco Vitelli sat frozen, his face pale, his eyes darting toward the exits. "Mr. Vitelli," Judge Morales said calmly, please return to the witness stand. Marco didn't move. Mr. Vitelli, now. 2 marshals stepped closer. Marco swallowed hard, straightened his tie, and walked slowly to the stand. He sat down, his composure cracked but not yet shattered. Judge Morales leaned forward. Mr. Vitelli, can you explain why your name appears on offshore bank accounts receiving funds from the Bernardo family businesses? Marco licked his lips. Those documents are fake, fabricated. And the photographs showing you meeting with members of the Castellano family, also fabricated? I don't know those people. I've never met them. The judge held up one of the photographs Tony had presented. This is you, is it not? June 14th, 3 weeks before Mr. Bernardo's arrest. Marco's eye twitched. That could be anyone. It's not clear. And the recording? Judge Morales' voice hardened. Your voice discussing how to take Alfie down and split his empire? Is that also fabricated? That recording is doctored. It's fake. The kid made it up. The voice analysis will confirm whether it's your voice, Mr. Vitelli. Do you want to change your answer? Silence. Marco's hands were shaking now. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His eyes darted to Alfie, still seated at the defendant's table, and something dark flashed across his face. Mr. Vitelli, the judge pressed, did you frame Alfie Bernardo? No. Did you plant evidence to have him arrested? No. Did you conspire with the Castellano family to destroy your own boss? I said no. Then explain the recording. Marco broke. Fine. He shot to his feet, face twisted with rage. Yes, I set him up, all of it. The evidence, the witnesses, everything. The courtroom gasped. Alfie wanted out, Marco screamed. He wanted to go straight. After everything we built, everything. He was going to walk away and leave me with nothing. His voice cracked. He deserved to rot in prison. He betrayed the life. He betrayed me. Absolute silence. Every person in the courtroom stared at Marco Vitelli, the man who had just confessed to destroying an innocent man. Judge Morales spoke quietly. Marshals, take Mr. Vitelli into custody. 2 officers moved forward. Marco didn't resist. His face had gone blank, empty, like a man who had just realized what he'd done. Tony stood frozen at the front of the courtroom, tears streaming down his face. It was over. Judge Catherine Morales let the silence hang for a long moment. The courtroom was still. Marco Vitelli stood in handcuffs between 2 marshals, his head bowed, his lies exposed for the world to see. Journalists sat frozen, pens hovering over notebooks. The prosecutor stared at his table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. And Alfie Bernardo, the man they called the Bull, the man the whole city believed was a monster, sat at the defendant's table with tears streaming down his face. Judge Morales spoke. In light of the evidence presented today and the confession of the prosecution's star witness, this court has no choice but to dismiss all charges against Alfie Bernardo. She paused. Mr. Bernardo, you are free to go. The courtroom erupted. Journalists shouted. Camera flashes exploded. People jumped to their feet, some cheering, others simply stunned by what they had witnessed. But Tony didn't hear any of it. He only saw his father. Alfie rose from the defendant's table, still in his orange jumpsuit, still wearing the chains of a man the world had already condemned. A marshal stepped forward to remove his handcuffs. The metal clicked open and fell away, and then Alfie ran. He pushed past lawyers, past marshals, past the wooden barrier separating him from the gallery. He ran toward the small boy standing at the front of the courtroom, the boy who had refused to give up, who had fought when no one else would, who had believed in his father when the whole world called him a monster. Alfie dropped to his knees and pulled Tony into his arms. They held each other in the middle of the courtroom, both sobbing, neither able to speak. Cameras flashed around them. Journalists shouted questions. None of it mattered. You saved me, Alfie whispered into his son's hair. You saved me, Tony. Tony buried his face in his father's chest and cried harder than he had ever cried in his life. "I told you, Dad," he choked out. "The truth always wins." 1 year later, the restaurant was warm and busy and smelled like garlic and fresh bread. Mama Rosa's Italian Kitchen. That's what the sign said above the door, named after Tony's mother. The first of 12 locations across the city, all legitimate, all legal, all built from the ground up by a man who had finally left his old life behind. Tony wiped down tables after school, wearing an apron that was too big for him. Alfie worked in the kitchen, laughing with the staff, taste-testing sauces, looking healthier and happier than Tony had ever seen him. The mail arrived at 4 o'clock. One envelope stood out, official courthouse stationery. Tony opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten note. "To the bravest young man I've ever met, never stop fighting for the truth. With admiration, Judge Catherine Morales." Tony read it 3 times. Then he walked to his bedroom, found a frame, and hung the letter on his wall, right next to the photo of his mother.